Hey guys, it's Miss Keenum, and today we're going to talk about how to compare fractions using common denominators. This is part 3 of our 3-part video series on comparing fractions. Part 1 covered comparing fractions using benchmark fractions, and part 2 covered comparing fractions using common numerators. If you would like to learn how to compare fractions using the other two methods, please go and look at the previously uploaded videos. So before we can compare fractions, we must first understand what a fraction is. You can see that there's a pizza in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That pizza, to make up the entire pizza, we would need 4 slices. Each slice of pizza is a fraction. So fractions are what make up a whole. So you can see that I have 3 pieces of pizza remaining. So the fraction I have remaining is 3/4. 1 slice is missing. So the fraction of missing pizza is 1/4. So when I write a fraction as 3/4, or as we would say 3/4, the top number is my numerator. That is the number of slices either remaining or missing, however you look at it. The bottom number is my denominator. The denominator represents the total number of pieces to make the whole. So in this case, it takes 4 slices of pizza to make the whole pizza. So our first question asks us to compare 1/4 and 3/4. So in this problem, today we're focusing on comparing fraction using common denominators. Remember, our denominator is our bottom number. So remember, this is our denominator, and I'm just going to abbreviate it with the D. So our bottom denominator, or our bottom number, is our denominator, and it equals 4. Because of both these numbers have the same denominator, we do not need to do any math. But I've started with this problem so that we can visually understand how we can compare fractions using the same denominator. So you can see here that I have created 2 pie charts. The first pie chart represents the fraction 1/4. I have split my pie into 4 sections because it takes 4 sections to make the whole pie. And I've colored in 1 section, which represents my 1/4. On this side, I have that same pie, and it's still divided into 4 sections. It's the same size pie. And remember, it takes 4 sections to make the whole. But on this one, I've colored in 3 slices of my pie to represent my 3/4. The colored in section is determined by the numerator. So you can see here I have 1 slice colored in because I have 1/4. And over here I have 3 slices colored in because I have the fraction 3/4. Looking at these 2 pieces of pie, or these 2 pie charts, I can see that my fraction 3/4 is much greater than 1/4. Because the colored in green portion, which represents my 3/4, takes up a much larger space than my colored in yellow portion, which represents 1/4. So you can see that the 1/4 fraction is much smaller than my 3/4 fraction. And remember, when we are comparing fractions using like denominators, we look at the numerator to determine the fraction size. Because we're using the same denominator, we are going to have the same slices, or the same number of pieces to make our whole. So the same number of parts to make our whole means we're going to look at our numerator, the top number, to determine the fraction size. Okay, let's work on this one. We're comparing the fractions 4/6 to 1/5. So to compare these fractions in today's video, we want to get the same denominator. So you can see that my denominator in the first fraction is 6. And my denominator in the second fraction is 5. So I have to get the same number on the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to look for a number that both 6 and 5 are divisible by. So I can either look for my least common multiple of the numbers 6 and 5, or what I can do, which a lot of times is the same thing as the least common multiple, I can multiply this 4 6 by a fifth, or by the bottom number would be a 5 from this number right here. But remember, as we talked about in the comparing numerators video, if I'm going to multiply my fraction by anything, I can only multiply it by 1. And remember, 1 would equal 5 over 5 in this case. Any fraction that has the same numerator and same denominator equals 1. And I can only multiply my 4 6 by 1. So to do that, I multiply it times 5 over 5. And then I have to do the same thing for my 1/5. So I'm going to multiply my 1/5. And remember, the purpose of this is to get the same denominator, or the same number on bottom. So I know I'm going to have to multiply my 5 by 6 to get the same number on bottom. But as I said before, I also have to multiply it by 6 over 6 to really multiply the fraction by 1. So when I do this, my answer becomes 4 times 5 over 6 times 5 and the answer is 20 over 30. Okay, now I'm going to go to my bottom number and I'm going to multiply in the same way. So this time I'm going to multiply 1 times 6 over 5 times 6. And my answer becomes 6 over 30. So you can see here that we ended up with the same denominator of 30. So 30 is my denominator. And see how I multiplied 6 times 5 to get 30 and 5 times 6 to get 30? And to determine that, I just basically multiply my denominators, the denominator, the bottom number, by each other. So I multiplied these two numbers by each other to end up with the same denominator. So now I'm comparing the fractions. 20 over 30 and 6 over 30. As stated in the previous slide, when I'm comparing fractions using like denominators, I use the numerator to determine the fraction size. So in this case, 20 over 30 is greater than 6 over 30. And remember, our 20 over 30 fraction really was this 4 over 6 fraction. So therefore, 4/6 is greater than 1/5. To show this graphically, we can look here. I have my pie chart divided into 6 pieces. 4 pieces are colored in. And over here, I have my pie chart divided into 5 pieces with 1 piece colored in. And we can see that the 4/6 fraction is much larger than the 1/5 fraction.